Hi, my name is Hannah Baiardi. I'm 22 years old and I'm studying jazz piano at the University of Michigan. My first piece I wrote was called Mountains back when I was 5 years old. I just started playing a fifth on the piano, and then the next thing you know, I wrote that song and a few others, and that's when I really discovered that composing was inherent just to my being, to my existing. A lot of my lyrics tell of staying true to yourself and finding your voice in a world full of insecurity and uncertainty, and having the power to be yourself, finding the courage to be yourself. For El Amor a Través de las Tierras, or Love Across Lands, my concept was to take the listener on an emotional journey, just to feel deeply, to conjure up a feeling of, be it love or tenderness or gratitude or remorse or healing, but just to bring out these feelings. For my listeners, I really want to create music that touches them deeply, that causes them to have pause and to reflect and to feel deeply, be it a sadness, a remorse, a happiness, a joy, a longing. I want my music to conjure up a feeling of reflection, because I feel like we're in such a fast-paced world now that oftentimes we're multitasking and we forget to let the music wash over us. So a lot of my lyrics stem from a very personal place, finding my voice as a young woman and growing up and developing my character. And a lot of my lyrics speak to inner strength, inner beauty, standing up for what you believe in, your core values, in a world that's so full of insecurity today. And really just finding music that resonates, that sticks, that the next day you'll remember a lyric and that'll get you through the day, or the melody you'll still be singing days after you've heard the song. That's my goal as an artist, to communicate a passion for life, for love, for music, and to connect people, to really unite people through the music I create. And I am composing a lot of pieces that don't necessarily fall under one genre. So I like to think of my music as genre-defying, as a music that transcends barriers and that can't be categorized. So right now I'm working on a piece of music that features flugel and a rhythm section, but backed by a string quartet. Last year I wrote a R&B soul tune with my good friend Jasmine, and wrote it for her to sing, and it featured my amazing friends that happen to be some of my favorite musicians, saxophone, bass, drums, and I like forming these unique instrumentation, these instances where you find some instruments that belong to jazz, some instruments that belong to classical idiom, and you bring them together. Right now I'm working on a piece that features a string quartet that's in the background of flugelhorn in a rhythm section. So I'm really enjoying working with blending genres and taking elements of usually classical music and jazz music and merging them together. So bringing a violin into a jazz setting. I think that this really breaks down barriers when you get to work with musicians like Adam and Rebecca on guitar and violin that you would not find in a typical like big band setup or a combo setup per se. You kind of form a unique permutation of musicians. It breaks down barriers. You start talking and realizing you have a lot in common, and just because you're from studying two different idioms, at the core we're still musicians, and working together is really a joy with musicians who understand your concept and are passionate about a piece you wrote and really understand what it means on an emotional level. I want the listener to be reminded to slow down, that it's okay to just focus on one thing, focus on the song and the feelings it brings about. There's something really liberating about being a jazz artist, and because jazz musicians at their core, we're improvisers, we're composers, everything we do comes from that perspective. There's not a sense of rigidity or real form that you have to be confined to a certain you know, style or tenor or notes even, or rhythm. There's just so much liberty. And I think that really has meant a lot growing up with that tradition, growing up with the understanding that it's okay to mess up, because that doesn't really exist in jazz. As long as it's intentional, the music you make will stand on its own. And it's hard to judge jazz because it's just such a free-flowing idiom. And that's what's beautiful about it, that it's from each person who performs it, that's their unique take on a tune or a change. There's so much room for subtlety and nuance in the harmony, and so much room for richness. I think that's why I was gravitated to jazz my whole life, is there's so many colors and nuances that I feel like you can get, especially from being a pianist, that you have a whole orchestra at your fingertips and you can create all sorts of sounds. And I started hearing string parts and melodies for other instruments that I had never written before. And I'm just now getting into writing for instruments kind of outside my comfort zone that I don't really work with on a regular basis in the jazz idiom. And I find that really exhilarating, because I feel like I am crossing barriers and creating new sounds and new setups and working with musicians that I wouldn't have necessarily worked if I just had stuck within the jazz idiom. I'm really proud to be a woman in jazz. Power to the women, I say. It's not been easy. I mean, it's definitely when you're in a male-dominated profession or setting, a lot of times you have to rely on your morale and your inner voice a lot of times to keep you going. A lot of the guys I like to play with play in different styles that I play, and sometimes I have to remind myself, you know, my voice is unique and the music I create is unifying, or hopefully that's the intention, that it unites people and not just jazzers, but women in jazz and women from different backgrounds and men from different backgrounds, and it kind of knows no divide.